Yeah, we had to let the intro music play a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lawrence Report. And tonight we will be discussing episode 3 of X-Men 97. Now, I just have one question. Will the real Jean Grey please stand up? This right here was another phenomenal episode of X-Men 97. And of course, it left me wanting more. In fact, we're going to take a dive into Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, aka the Goblin Queen herself. And also, we cannot forget about that ending. They ended, we did see, you saw her. You saw what I'm wearing, right? Yeah, let's get into it, y'all. So, on episode 3 of X-Men 97, they basically continued to where they left off. We saw that there was a clone coming to the X Mansion, and we didn't know who was the real Jean Grey. There is a Jean Grey that Scott is currently with, who he had a baby with. Then there's a clone that came at the doorsteps, right? We do find out, and I mentioned this in my video also, my last video, that we do find out that this current clone has something to do with the whole Mr. Sinister situation. I kind of felt like he was behind this right here because we know that for him, his goal is to ultimately steal the child, of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, Goblin Queen, and he wants to make those genetics more superior. He's all about genetic evolution, if you know about Mr. Sinister, right? So this episode is a complete mind bender, from the colors that they had in this episode right here to the shattered glass scene with Magneto. That was incredible in itself. This episode, it really, played a few tricks on your mind, including myself. Now, we know that, there is a baby that is currently in danger, right? That baby is Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor's baby, who we thought was Jean Grey, right? That baby ends up growing up. Well, I should say the baby's name is actually Nathan Summers, but he ends up growing up to be Cable, right? And Cable is basically a time traveling type mutant. He has this virus that he was infected by, but at the same time, he is a master when it comes to being a soldier and just weapons and things of that nature right there. It's just a quick overview of who Cable is. Mr. Sinister, he, basically invades the X Mansion, right? He has all these tricks of the mind that he plays on. The X-Men 917, they're met with this threat who they don't know, who is the real Jean Grey, and of course, BC's run these couple of tests to figure out who is the real Jean Grey, and we do figure out that, Madeline Pryor is in fact this clone. And Mr. Sinister, he's playing all of these tricks on the mind of all the members, right? And eventually, Sinister does take over the mind of Madeline Pryor. She has the baby, Nathan Summers, with her as well. And she just transforms, to the Goblin Queen herself. And now Scott is torn because Scott is trying to figure out, is this the Jean Grey I know? Or which Jean Grey am I supposed to be loving? Because I had a baby with one, but then there's one that just came up to the doorstep. So who is the actual Jean Grey? So it's just a whole mind bender for this episode right here. And while the team is even trying to pursue Madeline Pryor, I didn't believe this right here when I saw this, but Madeline Pryor absolutely gave it to Magneto. She kicked Magneto's butt in this episode right here. He was getting that work from Madeline Pryor, and it's rare that Magneto ever takes a L, period. You know what I'm saying? But while the real Jean Grey, she's laying on the bedside, she's attended by Wolverine. She tells the team that, I have to fight this woman. I gotta join this fight. I gotta join this team, right? And we do end up getting down to, seeing how Mrs. Sinister was behind all of this right here. And eventually, I hate this part for Scott because Scott was abandoned by his father, right? And they show this in this episode. He even talks about, the abandonment with his father, how, he didn't want his child to be abandoned because they figured the only way they really could save Scott Summers was to let Bishop take the child into the future, right? And we do see the real Jean Grey. She's saying these words of affirmation over her son, basically letting her son know that he will not be alone. But for Scott, he can't stand to bear witness of what's going to happen. to his child, and he walks away because Scott is dealing with some abandonment issues from his own father. So I hate that for Scott, but but at the same time, I love how they dealt with a real issue that's happening with many people in the world, which is child abandonment, right? After the battle between the X-Men and Sinister, we do see Madeline Pryor and Jean Grey. They kind of, touch bases with each other before Madeline Pryor, goes about her own way. And I'm wondering if we will see Madeline Pryor again in this season of X-Men. But as this episode concludes, we do end up seeing the one and only Storm, right? We see Storm at the end of this. She's at this bar and she ends up meeting Forge, right? Now, Forge, he is a former military guy. He is of Native American descent. He's actually an amputee. And he has mystical powers, and he's actually a master when it comes to technological advanced weaponry, right? In fact, he was working for the US government, and he helped create this weapon that basically neutralized Storm's powers, right? So now he introduces himself to Storm. They're going to create the life after death storyline. That's what's coming in X-Men 97 when it comes to Storm relationship and her relationship with Forge, basically. So we will see, how that is going to come to pass. Of course, if you read the comics, you already know how it does come to pass, but I'm talking about for the people who just only know it from the current cartoon that we're seeing. So we're going to see Storm get her powers back throughout this season. I believe they're going to save the best for last, and I believe they're going to save that for episode 10. But we will have to see on X-Men 97. And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Lawrence Report.